In this lesson, we're going to learn about the kingdom Protista, protists if you like. We do not think about this kingdom very often. My guess is because the organisms in this kingdom are very tiny. So if we don't see them, we don't think about them, right? But nonetheless, they are very important. Let's look at the characteristics of the organisms in this kingdom. The first important thing to remember is that protists are eukaryotic. They have well-defined nuclei. Protists generally are unicellular organisms, that is, they are composed of single cells. Most protists live in aquatic environments. They like water and wet environments. They reproduce largely via binary fission, in which case a protist basically divides into two new protists. Some protists also reproduce sexually, producing male and female gametes that fuse and develop into a new protist. Organisms in kingdom Protista are grouped into four major phyla: Protozoa, Euglenophyta, Chrysophyta, and Pyrophyta. There are protists like Paramecium and amoeba that exhibit features characteristic of animals. They belong to the phylum Protozoa. They do not make food, they feed on other food sources. More interestingly, there are some protists that are a bit strange because they exhibit both animal and plant features. They are grouped under the phylum Euglenophyta. Euglena viridis is an example. Now let's talk about how protists move around. Some protists move around by means of pseudopodia, singular pseudopodium, which means false feet. Such protists like amoeba belong to the class Rhizopoda, so amoebae are rhizopods. Then there are others that have what looks like a tail or a tail-like structure called the flagellum, plural flagella. They belong to the class Mastigophora. Gardia and Trichomonas are examples. Some others move around with the aid of microscopic hair-like structures called cilia, singular cilium, and are in the class Ciliophora. An example is Paramecium. Going further, there are others that have no organelles for movement. They belong to the class Sporozoa. Plasmodium and Babesia are examples. They produce spores. So let's recap to get an overview of the general characteristics of protists. Protists are single-celled or unicellular organisms. They are also eukaryotic, meaning they have well-defined and distinct nuclei. They can move either by the aid of hair-like structures called cilia, tail-like structures called flagella, or pseudopodia when they are amoeboid in shape. Some of them manufacture their food, while some of them take in food, and they may reproduce both sexually and asexually. Love learning, and I'll see you soon.